We're talking about questions that are likely to come up in the local interview, either following or sometimes immediately before your assessment. The second theme we're going to look at is questions about the force. And this is the force's opportunity to find out how interested, how committed you are to our organisation. But it's going to cost an awful lot of money to actually put you through the training system. Then the force has got you for potentially 35 years, and you can do a lot of good and a lot of harm in that time. And it's the force's opportunity to have an inkling of which one of those two things is likely to happen if they take you on. So, it's a very reasonable question if you look to join the police service for us to say to you, what are the force priorities or challenges? And we would expect you to know, not in depth, but we'd expect you to have had a look at the force website, and every force will have a page there with the Chief Constable's views on what he or she considers to be the key challenges and priorities that the force is facing at the moment. Look at the Police and Crime Commissioner's website for that particular force and be able to actually explain, just for a minute or so, what are the key challenges. If you're joining a small rural force, their challenges may well not be counter-terrorism and serious and organised crime. If you're joining a big city force, they may well be. But be able to talk about that just for a minute or so. Some forces are interested in your creativity at this stage, and they might start asking you, well, how could we actually use social media more? And one would hope you're able at that stage to say, well, I'm aware that whatever force it is, use social media by such and such. Perhaps individual officers have their own Twitter accounts with force approval. Perhaps there are community groups set up, or the traffic department has one set up. And we'd be interested in what ideas you have, how we could actually expand that. In what way are you thinking that you could use social media more? So be prepared to talk for a couple of minutes about that. And see if you can inject a bit of personality to it. Nothing too outrageous, but how could we actually utilise social media more? How do you think, moving on to the next question, the force could integrate with the community more? Because every force has that challenge. Every single force has that challenge. So, and there's a series of linked themes that we're talking about here. This question could go down the route of, so who are the community? How would you integrate yourself into the community? And a very common answer is to say, well, what I'd do is I'd have a walk around the town centre, introduce myself to people. Well, yeah, okay, good luck with that. But if you're in the centre of Leicester or the centre of Manchester, how exactly are you going to do that? Or you're out in a rural community, how exactly are you going to walk into the local village and do that? So think about who the community are, because one community is made up of numerous smaller groups. So make a list for yourself of those groups in the community worthwhile identifying with. Some of the more obvious ones are things like schools, big local stores, publicans, librarians, religious groups. So think about those areas of the actual local community, and you have a choice. You can either spend your afternoon walking around the town centre saying hello to people randomly, or you can attend 2 community meetings where that particular community will get to know you as an individual and you will get to know them. And the advantage of that is that when that community has concerns or has information about who's committing crime in the area, they will be able to identify you as the individual they spoke to at that time, and they will come to you. Just on that same note as well, be conscious that once you've created those links, you want to continue to build on them and be able to explain the advantages of actually having those links into the community. And that's all around crime and trust and reassurance. Linking in with that is recruiting more to reflect the community. So the police service has made great efforts in recent years to make itself more representative of local communities. So what ideas have you got for the force to actually do more of that? Should we target particular groups for recruitment? Should we target, in terms of intensifying our recruitment efforts, people from, for example, the Somali community? Certain forces have a very, very large immigrant population from Eastern Europe. In that particular case, if those people are settled in this country, should we be making a direct effort to actually go and recruit more people who, for example, are from the Polish community and who speak Polish? Yeah. So think a little bit more wider than race, sex, gender and sexuality. Right? There is more to that than you would at first think about. So be able to consider that. And consider whether it's right or not to actually target those groups. Well, the reality of it is that, yeah, of course it's right. Because if you're from a Anglo-Saxon white British background, you mightn't have any issue whatsoever with your interaction with the police service. If you're from a country whereby the police are corrupt, brutal, oppressive, and very untrustworthy, it would be reasonable for you to expect the people in front of you in a uniform in England and Wales to view the police in the same light. So how do we actually increase our standing in that community? Well, we target more to actually recruit more from that community. So we represent the people we're policing. And a final one linked in with this is the ability to actually help victims. A very, very big issue, underlying policing. So when somebody is the victim of crime, how do we deal with them more sympathetically and more positively? Because we may or may not be able to actually detect that particular offence. But how do we reassure them we've taken it seriously? If we can't actually detect the offence, how do we reassure them that we are taking it seriously and we are trying to prevent a further reoffence taking place? If we actually do detect the offence in terms of arresting somebody, how do we keep the victim informed? How do we give the victim reassurance that the offender won't go around and try and assault them again? How do we do all of that? How do we progress that through the court system? What support do they offer when they actually get to the courts? And some of that is actually due to the courts themselves. But how does the police service, its involvement in this system, actually help? And what you're doing with those kind of questions is helping the force to see that you've clearly thought about the wider role of a police officer and you've actually researched our force. And you should be able to name certain initiatives and priorities and goals and operations the force has been involved in. And that sounds really hard, but it's not. Simply go to the force website, subscribe to its Twitter feed, and the force will tell you all of these things and be able to chat about it, not in depth, just for a minute or so. And if you do that, you'll be comfortable about the force. Just linked in with that point, it's a little bit old-fashioned now, but some forces do still ask things like, what's the name of our chief constable? And we would expect you to know. It's not an unreasonable thing for us to ask. How many police officers do we have in the force? How many geographical areas do we have? So just do your homework on the force itself. And to be honest, if you look to be a police officer, you should have done anyway.